Okay, so let's take this from the start. Knight f3, h5. Now you might wonder, okay, what happens if white plays the fianchetto already and then preserves the possibility to play d4, c4 later on and try to transform this game into a normal Catalan or Queen's Gambit or whatever, any of those. Okay, this is it. h4. We don't care that, well, if our opponent takes the pawn, then, okay, well, this is a very similar scenario to what was happening before. It's bad. You may argue, okay, knight takes. But before we go through that, we are going to go there. But let's see 1 second if pawn really takes, okay? Just in case it wasn't clear. Here's what will happen, more or less. d5. And after d4, bishop to g4. Take the knight, take the pawn. That's it. You can say, okay, for instance, let's say bishop to g5, defending that pawn. Still, take the knight. Pawn takes back, and we are happy. Even if we're down a pawn, we're happy for what we have created. Look at this terrible pawn structure. Okay, queen d6, avoiding the pin so we can move this pawn, the e-pawn. Knight c3, knight c6, queen d2, normal development, e6. It looks like now the white player will castle long, and it's all fine. No, because f6, you can always reserve the possibility to play f6. The bishop moves, and now this pawn will be targeted again. It is targeted. So knight g to e7 is the best move. Keep developing. King b1. These are all computer moves. But now knight to g6. And the bishop moves. You can say now, okay, doesn't the bishop there protect everything? Well, you can still take in h4, by the way. But most accurate is king f7. Here, remember, h5, you just take it, right? And if white plays bishop to d3, just developing, right? Okay, here you finally recapture this pawn. You're attacking f3, so after f4, knight takes the pawn in d4, so you're winning. Now you can argue, okay, bishop g6 check. King takes, crazy enough. And after the opponent recaptures the lost material, queen to d4, knight f5. The king is completely safe in g6. This is how crazy it is when you analyze with the computer. Queen d3, pinning the knight, and then king f7. That's it. We never have to worry. Rook to h2 g1, putting rook in an open file. Rook to d8. The black player has been winning this game and will go on to win the endgame because of the very damaged pawn structure of our opponent. We've got nothing to worry here. And we also have a majority on the queen side. We're going to be storming soon. c5, a6, b5, and so on. And by the way, in this position, earlier we went through bishop g5 idea, trying to protect this pawn. Doesn't work. What happens after normal development? Bishop g2, e6, and now h3 attacking the bishop, take. Now the bishop can take back. And some integrity is preserved in the pawns of the opponent, except for these two on the side, obviously. Okay, queen takes back now. We don't want to mess around too much. I don't want to meet bishop g5 in that position. So let's just recapture. Queen h4, queen d2, developing c5. Queen d2, the idea is to play queen 2. Let me explain this. The idea here, obviously, if white castles, is game over. And the white player will not be able to castle anytime soon. You might say bishop, e3, and then queen d2, knight c3, and then castle, but it takes ages. And you're going to be storming these pawns before our opponent has a chance to do anything. You can always play g6 and then bishop, for example. This rook in g1 will never do anything. The king side is completely safe. So let's say this move, queen d2, the idea of bringing queen to g5, trying to get a swap of queens, reducing the initiative and going on. c5, c3, because we have the intention to take, knight c6. And now look, queen g5 can't really happen. I mean, it can, but after the swap, you have the intention to take. You're going to take back, knight d4. It's game over. Attacking this bishop, threatening to swap to destroy the pawn structure even more, threatening knight c2. And by the way, just a few moves ago, after c5, you can't say, okay, white will get out of any problem by taking the pawn, because then you can take back with the bishop, and you have a strong attack on f2. And white will be forced to play e3. So let's look at e3 then. Well, let's look at c3 as we were going through the line. Knight c6, e3. Knight f6. We still have an intention to take, and then we also have this bishop move here. Knight e4, putting pressure and finalizing the attack. Whatever the bishop takes, queen takes back. This rook will be unguarded, will have to move. The rook will be able to go to h3. It's completely over. Nothing stops you from playing c takes. Even a move like b4. This is thematic move, but you're just taking d4. Taking with c4 is obviously super stupid. So taking with the e pawn, just play rook to c8. And the idea, and this is unstoppable because this knight can't develop, this bishop can't go anywhere that makes sense. The idea is to play knight d4. And after all the swaps, you should be able to take the bishop in c1. So let's say it's our move again. We will play this move, knight d4. Queen takes, but then queen takes, pawn takes, and you take the bishop. It's an amazing endgame to play. If pawn takes, knight e4, removing the queen from the defense of the bishop, and threatening also bishop to b4, and also threatening queen to f2. So that's the plan we're going for. Bishop takes here in a4 is not possible because queen takes comes with a check and an attack on the opponent rook. It's a fork. And by the way, queen b2 doesn't save everything because of bishop b4 check. Even when you get taken, you've got this move and checkmate to follow. So let's go from the start. Knight f3, h5. And we're looking at the immediate g3. Okay, h4. And now the more sensible knight takes h4. This is the move we were waiting for. Now you're wondering, okay, what have you got prepared? Endgame strategies. e5 comes now. And we're taking control of the center. That's literally what's happening. Nothing more. The knight can't just go back to f3 because e4. The knight has to move again. Wherever he goes, he will be uncomfortable. The knight will not be able to go to f3 or d3 anymore. Knight to d4, okay. c5. And now what? Wherever he goes, he's going to get trapped. Unless he goes to b3. This is the best move. c4. Okay, knight back to d4. Looks like we're pushing pawns here and we're not making much sense. Crazy enough, this is the best move now. Knight to c6. If white defends the knight with the pawn, we can start damaging the pawn structure. If white takes us, we take with the d pawn. And what have we achieved? We have achieved something beautiful, very deep, that you need to understand to get your rating up. We have achieved massive control over f3, the neutralization of the strong fianchetto bishop, because remember, you're going to play queen d5 at some point. Massive control over d3, meaning that d3 can't happen because we have more attackers, unless our opponent wants to take eventually with the bishop as well, but then we carry on with the bishop pair in an open endgame. White can't just play these type of moves like d4 because you can take en passant. And our opponent cannot play any pawn in the center. White cannot have any pawn in the center. So let's see one line now as an example of this. Let's see, okay, bishop g2. Immediately you punish it, bishop to h3. And by the way, the bishop can't just go and take in e4 because then the white player is completely leaving out development so much. He keeps moving. I mean, technically it is possible, but then, okay, look, knight f6, attacking the bishop. The bishop will have to go. Can't go back to g2 anymore. He's lost his fianchetto square. Knight f3. Okay, queen a5. The idea, crazy enough, is to protect g5 square. So you want to play g5, g4, trapping the bishop. And you can say, okay, why can you not play g5 already? Well, our opponent can play e3, right? Or d3. But if you play queen a5, d3 is not possible. So the idea is to play g5 now. Okay, what happens if now white plays e3 already, which is a move that makes so much sense. But look, the white player can't castle anymore. He cannot castle this side, king side. He will have to play a move like the d pawn at some point to develop this bishop, the knight, the queen, and so on. But do you think that's going to happen? That's not going to happen. g5 comes. Black is only slightly better. It's like -1 or something. Because if you let the computer play, there is a way out of this. But it's going to be terribly difficult. What is our opponent going to do? Okay, c3. I'm pinning the d pawn. Maybe pushing d4. Maybe playing bishop e2 first. It's just not going to happen. g4. Bishop moves. Queen f5. White is paralyzed. Unable to move. You can't really take this pawn because then bishop to g2. The rook has to move. So let's say bishop takes bishop g2, rook g1. And now the rook takes in h2. Here now you can say, okay, maybe there is an escape. d4. Looks like finally white will be able to move the knight, the queen, the bishop, maybe castle. It's too late. Bishop to d5. We're attacking this bishop, we're also threatening mate. There is no coming back. What if instead of d4, white had played queen e2 first? Okay, bishop f3. And after queen to d3, suggesting a swap for us, knight to e4. We're not okay with that. Look at these pawns, the white pawns. Look how sad they look. The idea here is to play rook to d8 and win the game on the spot. There is not going to be anything to do. After rook d8, the white player will be forced to play queen c2, then you play b5. Okay, let's make an example. So here white has to develop. Let's say knight a3, potentially joining the game. Knight c2, knight d4 will be fantastic. Rook to d8, queen moves, let's say queen b1. Because the knight can't really go to b5, so we'll have to give him the c2 square. b5. Bishop e3, because bishop e2 is not possible, because you can trade it and then you've got access to queen f2. Deadly move. So bishop goes to b3, but either way, this is the killer. And now you've got easy access to the square f2. So if we take that from the start, we're going to see, okay, g3 early, h4. Knight takes e5. Knight f3, going back to f3 immediately, attack it. Knight moves, attack it. Knight moves, attack it. Knight moves, knight c6. Takes. Bishop g2, you punish it with bishop h3. So let's not go through bishop not developing and rather just castling and see. Now the white player seems to have made a normal castle. Okay, queen to d5 comes now. What's the idea? The idea is obviously queen to h5. Let's make an example. e3 will be met with queen to f5. Because obviously e3, okay, the queen h5 will be fine because you're threatening to take the bishop and then going for checkmate next. But e3, the queen is attacking h5, so you have to give up on that and play queen f5. The best move according to the engine now is, well, the only one that doesn't lose, because you're threatening bishop g2 and then queen to h3. The only move is bishop h1, giving up the exchange. The best move by black, the most accurate, typical computer move where the computer doesn't care about material, is queen to h7. And that's because when you take, then you can go straight to h2. Rook to e1 seems like it saves everything. But now bishop e6, and now giving us access to this square. h4 looks like it stops it, but now g5. Look how segregated the opponent pieces, all the opponent pieces are in the back, and how all of these pawns here are just blocking the development of our opponent. And this all starts from h5, first move for black, h5. Okay, g5. This is now game over. A move like f3 can't happen because you will just take in h4. You wouldn't care. A move like h5, it looks like, can close the file. But now you just play knight f6. You're going to capture there. Development, knight c3. It doesn't matter. Long castle. You give the computer the possibility to take stuff and it just doesn't do it. And you keep wondering, when is he going to do it? And then you realize it's just developing. Most important thing. d3. Okay, bishop to g4. And that's it. If white plays f3 now, it looks like he's got enough attackers. But now queen to h5 finally happens. And we're going straight for a mate. If white plays, let's say, queen to d2, just moving away. Okay, again, queen to h5 is happening. And it's completely game over. So what this means is that we're going to go from the start. We're looking at the early g3. We still play h4 no matter what. Knight takes e5. And instead of looking at the knight going back to f3, let's see what happens with bishop g2 and maybe trying to play a normal game like that. We take control of the center now. d5, castle, and now g5. The knight's got nowhere to go. The bishop's attacking f5. So after knight f3, e4. And now the knight will, let's say, goes to e5, but the e5 is very uncomfortable. Okay, we're going to look at e5, but let's see what happens after knight to d4. This is punished immediately. Queen to f6 attacks the knight, but it's a fork. It's attacking the knight, but it's also attacking h6. Let's make an example. Let's say the knight gets defended. Okay, queen h6. No way out here. h3, you take it with the bishop. If instead h4, you take it. And now g4 looks like it stops the attack of the two major pieces. Okay, h3, attacking the bishop. And attacking the queen doesn't make sense because you can just stay on the same file, safe. If the bishop goes back, same thing, it's game over. Check, only move is this one, and this is mate. And really nothing works here. If you think, if instead of h3 or h4, white can play f4 and find an escape, you still go with the queen check, king moves. And I'll take the pawn in f4. We're going to dismantle everything that there is, every pawn around here. Rook cannot go to h1 with an attack on the queen because you can take this pawn with the pawn and check, and then you're going to win the bishop, and you're going to win the rook, you're going to win everything. And even if the king goes to f1, then you can sacrifice the queen for the rook. Bishop takes, rook takes, check, and then the king moves, and you're going to take the queen again, and yeah, a lot of material. So if instead our opponent just takes us, let's say how, with the g pawn, okay, fine, check. And now if the king goes on the same file of the opponent, on the same diagonal of his own queen, we've got a skewer with the bishop. If the king goes back, then queen check, king moves. To be the best accurate move will be bishop to h3 now. The bishop is pinned, so after rook g1 defending it, knight f6 comes, and this is unstoppable. And by the way, in this position, if white had taken with the e pawn, bishop c5 pins the knight and should win a piece. You can't just defend the knight c3 because you will play rook h3 now and you're threatening. You got double attack, the bishop is pinned, so you're going on g3. So this brings us back to this position, queen f6 attacking the knight and attacking h6. The best move here would be knight to b5, counter-attacking on the pawn in c7. Here the best reply is knight a6 to stop that. Because you see, you don't want to play queen f2 now, because after the white player will play h4 and you have to take with the pawn. The white player will lose a lot of material and stuff, but then he will kind of resist the checkmate attack. He will not be checkmated. But then he has the possibility to win a free rook and a pawn. This is really dangerous and you can't allow that to happen. So you play safe. Knight a6 is the best move. Let's go on with development. Knight c3. Okay, queen h6 comes. And after h4, take the pawn. Thematic, obviously. Now, knight to d5. These are all computer moves trying to resist in a faulty variation. Okay, ignore it and play g3. You want to checkmate. White has to take back. Queen h2 comes, king f2, bishop h3, starting to recognize the patterns. Rook to g1, castle saves everything. There is absolutely nothing that our opponent is threatening now. Knight to f4, going for this bishop, trying to reduce the initiative. Black plays knight f6, and we're going to close the line there because we don't have to worry about this one taking here, because we can just take back and the threat of knight g4 remains, and there's nothing that our opponent can do to stop that. Let's make an example. Knight takes. Now you don't want to recapture immediately because e3, then the queen is defending the square. It's kind of annoying. Just play knight g4 check straight away. King f1. Check. Winning the queen. So this brings us from the start, and we're going to look at the other move. So g3 now, h4. Takes with the knight, e5. Bishop to g2, d5. Castle, g5, and the knight is forced to e4, and now e4. Let's see what happens after knight e5. This is also not good. Black plays queen f6 immediately, and you're threatening the same thing as before, just trying to go to f6. What happens after d4? Okay, protecting the knight. Queen f5. It's a bit surprising, but the idea is which one? The idea is queen h7, and then going for the same thing. So let's look at this idea we haven't seen. f3. It's obviously to challenge this very strong center that we have. Queen h7 comes. And now, if the white plays knight to g4, defending this pawn, now obviously you're going to take the knight, removing the defender. And when pawn takes back, queen takes, there is no escape for the king. It looks like the king can go maybe to e1 and hide. But black just plays bishop to d6. It's too strong. You're completely winning. And in this position, instead of obviously not knight g4, but what if white tries an escape already? King f2. Okay, f6 attacks the knight. The knight has to move. Knight g4, only square. Okay, now knight to c6. And look, this pawn in e4, by the way, should not be taken. Simply because you win this knight. Did you see that? Now you did. So what to do here? There is not easy to find a move. Okay, let's see. You might argue development. Knight c3. Okay, take this. Pawn takes back. long castle. The situation is so much better for the situation is so much better for black. Rook to h1 now. It looks like the white player actually saved the king. We didn't infiltrate, and now the pawn in h2 is solid, defended by the rook. Doesn't matter. Our development is so much better. Bishop b4. This king is not very safe, the white king, if you think about it. h4 now. The idea is to take here, and this will be completely over for our opponent. And now knight h6 is the key move. We were going to play that move no matter what, because you have this attack. If our opponent takes us like that, we got this with the knight, it should be game over. Okay, let's look at this then. e3. And now the queen is protecting in g4. Okay, take the knight. Take back. Knight to a5. We want to go to this square, exploiting the weakness over e3. Rook to b1, for instance. Okay, queen to d7. We abandon that because we're gonna, obviously there's no point in remaining on the h file. Bishop to h3, defending that pawn a bit more. Rook d to g8. This is our opponent playing only computer moves, so that's not gonna happen in reality. Here we're threatening to take this pawn in h4 and finally go into g4. It's gonna be a devastation. h5 looks like it closed all the files. King to b8 is the best move. So why is the position so much better for black? Well, because white's pieces are confined to a role of defending pawns. They can never move without losing a lot of stuff. If this bishop were to move anywhere that wants to do something, knight c4 would be too strong. This queen literally has no way out from this, from her own blockade of pawns. This bishop is going to be there stuck forever defending this pawn. So obviously this is really bad. Black has a threat of playing f5 and then taking here, and that's going to be the final hit on the g4 pawn.